بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأصلي وأسلم على خير خلق الله أجمعين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah we're going to discuss the fiqh of names. So the fiqh of naming a newborn or a person in general, and we're going to discuss also things related to nicknames and also to a surname. And with that we have finished most of the masail connected to a newborn. And inshallah, we try and cover most of the name masail tonight. So firstly, the fuqaha say that a person should name their child, or let's say first the day we said to name the child is either on day 1 or day 7. Either on day 1 or day 7 according to how we explained which day fits. So when it comes to naming a child, in this case, the fuqaha say that a person should choose a name that has a good meaning for the child. They say this because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إنكم تدعون يوم القيامة بأسمائكم وأسماء آبائكم فأحسنوا أسماءكم أو فأحسنوا تسميتكم كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that on the day of Qiyamah, a person will be called by his name and by his father's name, or by her name and her father's name. Therefore, give each other good names, names with good meanings. On top of that, a name has a positive effect on the person. Many times a person has actually traits and characteristics from his or her name. So it's very important to give a person a good name, especially if a person is conscious of the meaning of the name, and it's a good lofty meaning of a name, and then a person is called by that name, it has a positive effect on the person. So that's the importance of giving your child a good name. And then from amongst the best names, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the most beloved names to Allah are Abdullah and Abdur Rahmaan. So name your child Abdullah or Abdur Rahmaan if they are boy. And if it's a girl, then to say the same meaning but feminine pronoun. So you say Amatullah or Amatur Rahman. Thereafter, the best names would be, after those two names, the best names would be every name where a person is attributed to being the slave of Allah. So that means you choose one of the names of Allah and you put Abd before it, because Abd means slave. So Abdullah means slave of Allah, Abd Allah, Abd the slave of Allah, and Abd Ar-Rahman the slave of Ar-Rahman. So you choose a name of Allah and you put Abd there. So you would say, for example, Allah's name Ar-Razzaq, so you say Abdur Razzaq. Or you say Al-Ilah, Allah's name is Ilah, you say Abdul Ilah. Or you say any other name of Allah, Abdur Ra'uf, etc. Abdur Rashid, etc. So that would be the second category of the best names, is that a person is named with a name that attributes one as being the slave of Allah using one of the names of Allah. Then they say the third category, the best names thereafter would be the names of prophets. And there are some narrations specifically specifying the name Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, the authenticity of those ahadith are questioned. Amongst them is what's narrated by Ibn Sabr from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said on the day of Qiyamah, people will be told to stand up, and then it will be said, those whose names are Muhammad, those people whose names is Muhammad, they should enter into Jannah as a means of honor of the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, as a means of honor to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for his name. So the names of prophets would be the third category of best names to name your children. And thereafter they say names of Sahaba, blessed names of blessed people. At the starting point would be Sahaba. Thereafter, every other name that has a good meaning. So thereafter, they mention some names that are even permissible, names that would fall into permissible to name with, and that is names of angels. So to name a child Mikael, for example, or to name a child Jibreel or Jibril, for example, all of that would be permissible. And in saying that, then they mention a few names that will be makrooh to name. A few names will be makrooh to name a child. And a few names, there are difference of opinion on the ruling on naming a child by that name. So for example, let's start with, in fact, one more thing, and that is the name of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Imam Malik said that he used to hear the people of Mecca saying that if there's a household and someone in the household is named Muhammad, then that will be, the barakah of that will be a means that that house will be blessed in sustenance. So these are just things narrated. They say those who narrate this, perhaps he heard it from people in Medina or people in Mecca, or there's some narration from someone of the Sahaba or Tabi'in to that effect. But in essence, to name with the best of names or names of the prophets, that would be something recommended. It would be the best names, and of course the best of prophets, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to name with his name. But then there are a couple of names that there's difference of opinion whether it would be permissible to name with them or will it be makrooh. So two examples that are generally given by the fuqaha, they say to name your child Yaseen or to name your child Taha. So there's a question whether these two words, let's say words, are they from the unknown letters of the Quran, like how you have alif lam mim, alif lam ra, you have Yasin is our example, but kaf ha ya ain sad. These are generally in tafsir, they have no meaning. They're deemed that the letters that the meaning of which is known to Allah. The meaning of which is known to Allah. In Balaaghah, they have their own unique place. So for example, one of the secrets of these letters, you'd find that surah or chapters of the Quran that begin with these letters, those letters are the most common letters found in the Quran, in that surah. So for example, if you take Qaf, you have Qaf wal Qur'an al-Majid, that's already there. بل عجبوا أن جاءهم منذر منهم فقال الكافرون. Then وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. Then وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا قَبْلَهُمْ مِنْ قَرْنٍ هُمْ أَشَدُّ مِنْهُمْ بَطَشًا. So Qaf repeats itself all over the Quran, all over the surah. So for example, again, you have like Sad, Alif Lam Mim Sad, and then you have the word Qasas. Qasas means stories. And that Surah Al-A'raf, that Alif Lam Mim Sad, it's filled with stories. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَقَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَٰهٍ غَيْرُهُ. And that's from Nuh alayhi salam. Then وَإِلَىٰ عَادٍ أَخَاهُمْ هُودًا, the story of Aad. Then story of Thamud, وَإِلَىٰ ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا. Then Madian, وَإِلَىٰ مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا. So and then the story of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. So that is what the Sad is there. Then you have, for example, Alif Lam Ra, Surah Al-Ra'd, the Ra is there, and the surah is speaking about Ra'd, thunder. Another example would be Sad, wal Qur'an dhi dhikr. The Sad is there, and then the Sad recurs itself, and it recurs itself in a specific manner. That is the word, if you take the word khusuma. Khusuma means like back and forth, like an argument. So the Sad is there, and then you have Hal ataka naba'ul khasm, wa hal ataka naba'ul khasm. And that is now the debate back and forth between Dawood alayhi salam and those two people who had a little skirmish amongst themselves, and they came jumping over the wall to bring the matter forward to Dawood alayhi salam. And then also towards the end you have Allah and Iblis, Shaytan, having a little kind of a back and forth with each other. So there also is a khasm, and that has the word Sad in it, and the surah starts with Sad. So like that, the secret of the Quran in Balaaghah. But in tafsir, you'd say these words, you will not find the tafsir of Alif Lam Ra in terms of tafsir. So these, most of the mufassirin will say this is the meaning of these letters are known to Allah. So Yasin and Taha, there's a difference of opinion whether those letters, Yasin and Taha, those four letters are also from those huruf muqatta'at, those letters that the meaning of which is known to Allah, or are they names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because the Quran says, Taha ma anzalna alayka. It says Taha, we've not revealed on you. So is there a connection between on you and Taha or not? Or is Taha one thing and then it starts the discussion towards Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Or is Taha addressing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Because then Allah says, Yasin wal Qur'an al-Hakim, innaka, you are from the messengers, innaka lamin al-mursalin. So that from you are from the messengers, and it starts Yasin. That's one aspect of why there's the question whether these letters are names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or are they unknown letters, unknown meaning of letters of the Quran. The other aspect is there are some ahadith that indicate that Yasin and Taha are the names of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of those ahadith, Imam Qurtubi mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I have 10 names. And then in mentioning those 10 names, among two of them were Yaseen and Taha. Yaseen and Taha. So therefore, though Imam Malik does not look at it like that, that's why to be makrooh from Imam Malik. But the other fuqaha, they say it's permissible. They say it's permissible to name your child Yaseen or Taha. As they would say, it has a link to being a name of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So that's with that. Then other types of names, they say that names should not have an aspect in it of purification or self-purification, or giving a person like a tazkiyah, like a purification, like a higher standard of self-purity, tazkiyah and ta'zeem. So it shouldn't have a kind of exaltation or glorification of the person. Those kind names are makrooh to be named with. Those kind names are makrooh to be named with, along with names that don't have good meanings, along with names that don't have good meanings. So names that give off some kind of purification, like if you were to name somebody Mubarak, Mubarak means blessed. Or you're to name somebody Salih, Salih means pious. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed some of the names of Sahabiyat. A few of them names were Barra. So Barra means piety. Salih means piety. Mubarak means blessed. So then it was said about this lady, her name was Barra, that she's basically, attributing piety to herself. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to her, change your name to Zainab. So therefore, those names, so here the fuqaha differ whether it will still be on the aspect of makruh. So some of them say if you intend the name along with the meaning of the name, then it will be makruh. Because then what will happen as well? So now you intend salih and you don't intend it just as a proper noun. You intend it with the meaning of piety. So that has a kind of, a person would think this has a kind of self-purification or a purification for the person that he is salih or that he is mubarak. So therefore, they'd say if the meaning is intended, then it would be makruh as well. But if like in some communities, the meaning is not intended. It has just become a proper noun. So you take a name like Khalid. Khalid means something that's everlasting. So they would also include this as being a name that's makruh because it has a meaning that doesn't fit. A person cannot be named Khalid. He cannot be named someone who's eternal. But if it's just used as a proper noun, nobody thinks when the name is said that they're not thinking that this is eternal, or they're not thinking blessed, this thing or this person is blessed. So they would say, so Arabs, it's common to name Khalid or the name Salih, and they don't intend the meaning. So therefore, some fuqaha would say it's not makruh in that case. Others, Ibn Hajar mentions in Fath al-Bari that in this case it would still be makruh. It would still be makruh from another angle, and that is in the sense that we're finding that most of the names, or most times we spoke about a good omen, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanting to send positive message and positive vibes throughout. So when we mention names that are not positive names, the meaning to be changed as well. So here, for example, the great Imam of Medina, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, rahmatullahi alayhi, his grandfather came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in Bukhari and Muslim. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked him, what's his name? So he said, my name is Hazan. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Bal anta sahl. Hazan means something that has roughness in it. There's some roughness in it. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, no, you're not hazan, you're not something that's rough, rather you are something that's easygoing. He said, Bal anta sahl, you are easygoing. So that man said, La ughayir isman sammanihi abi. So Hazan said, I'm not going to change a name that my father named me with. And outside of the Sahihain, he says, As-sahl yu'ta wa yumtahan. That someone is sahl, he's basically trampled over, he's walked over, no one takes him seriously. So he did not accept the changing of his name by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not command him to change his name. He did not command him to change his name when Hazn refused. Hence the fuqaha do not say it's haram, they say it's makruh. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed his name, kind of. But when Hazn refused, he did not say you must change your name. He let it go, he let it be. So that's why it would not be haram to keep a name that has a bad meaning or one of these names that are makruh, if they are makruh. But, so it would not be haram, it would be makruh. But it would be better to change it. So Sa'id al-Musayyib says, مَا زَالَتِ الْخُشُونَ فِينَا بَعْدُ. ما زالت الخشونة فينا بعد. That this aspect of roughness in our character, it still continues with us, with our people today, in our tribe, in our progeny, in progeny of the hazn. This aspect of hazn, this quality of hazn is still found in us. It's still found in us until today. So, and that is because rejecting the barakah of changing the name by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So there, that name, we said it has an effect on the person and the quality or attributes of a person. So that's one example. That's an example as well. And an example of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changing a name. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changing a name. It's because of the positive omen and positive vibes. So based on that, that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, you might ask, is this person, let's say the person, his name is Mubarak, and here's Mubarak is not with you, and somebody is with you, his name is not Mubarak. This person who comes towards you and this person with you, that person who comes thinks Mubarak is with you. He's not sure. So he asks you, is he Mubarak? So you say no. So you ask him, is he blessed? That's what the translation would mean. Is he blessed? And you say no. So it gives off a negative meaning. So to avoid that, that's why these kind of names are makrooh. To avoid that, that's why these kind of names are makrooh. Because then it just gives it off. Or you deny the barakah or the blessedness of a person, or the piety of a person, or he be against his name. He's actually pious, or his name is pious, but he is not actually pious. He's not actually pious in his life. So it has a negative effect. That's why these kind of names are they makrooh. But if you ask, is Mubarak next to you? Is that Mubarak? Is he Mubarak? And no one processes the meaning. They just take it as a proper noun, as a name, then that would be permissible, according to some ulama. Others still say, as I said, it would be makrooh still because of this aspect. You're going to say, is he Mubarak? Is that Mubarak? Is he Mubarak? You're going to say no. You say, where did you? I left barakah. I left Mubarak. I left barakah. I left something blessed. So to stay away from that meaning that's still there, they say do not name with these kind of names. Then other names that are makrooh, they say to name with names that are specific for the shayateen. So in some ahadith, you're going to get names of shayateen. For example, the shaitan that comes to whisper to a person while he's in salah, named Khanzab, it's makrooh to name with these kind of names. They also say it's makrooh to name with names of unjust rulers. So they say fara'ina. So those people who are Fir'aun. So to name your child Fir'aun, to name him Haman, for example, these kind names, Qarun, it will be makrooh to name your child, with these kind names. Then we said that the best names are names that a person is the slave of Allah, choosing the name Allah, one of his names. So the opposite of that would be something that's haram. And something that is haram is for a person to have a name, where he is named the slave Abd, and the person or who he is the slave of is not Allah. So who he is attributed to be the slave of is not Allah. That is haram. So if somebody were to say, my name is Abdul Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you say haram. If they were to be Abdul Ali, haram, because only Allah can be Abd. You were to say Abdul Kaaba, haram, etc. So these kind of names, where you are the Abd of something other than Allah, it would be haram. There's only one exception where there's the difference of opinion. With many ulama saying you still don't name with this name, and that is Abdul Muttalib. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. So here Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam clearly mentioned it and attributed himself to Abdul Muttalib. So Abd al-Muttalib, I am the slave of Muttalib. There's an actual story why the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is named Abdul Muttalib, and what happened with a slave entering the town. But we won't mention it here. But the fuqaha say that what happened here, what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was mentioning this name out of informing, not out of initiating that this is the name of this person. I'm naming this person with this name. So they say there's a difference between initiating and informing. So if you were to initiate, what's the name of this child? You would say Abdul Muttalib, they would say not permissible. But to inform permissible. So if a person's name is already something impermissible, a person's name is already something impermissible, and you are informing that's the person's name, Abdul Nabi, for example, if his name was like that, and you were to say, who is that? That's Abdul Nabi, permissible. But to say, this is a child, name this person, or name this child, and you would say Abdul Nabi, impermissible. And therefore, they'd say if a person is alive and he has a name that is haram, if he is alive and he has a name that is haram, then you change his name. Then you change his name. Because it's permissible to change names. Sometimes it's obligatory to change names. Obligatory to change names when it's haram. Permissible to change names when there's a need to do so, or benefit to do so. And also, if you want to change your name to a name that has a more positive meaning, then you can change your name. Then you can change your name. So we say it already has a good meaning. It already has a good meaning. If it doesn't have a good meaning, then obviously it's better to change your name. And if it's haram, then for sure you have to change your name. So if a person's name is Abdul Nabi and he's living, then we say to that person, you have to change your name. It's not permissible to be a slave to other than Allah, therefore change your name. But if the person already, let's say he passed away, so now there's no effect, and you are informing my friend is Abdul Nabi, or my brother, his name was Abdul Nabi, then or that my brother, he passed away, what is his name? Abdul Nabi. That's permissible. That's permissible to do it like that, because then you are informing, not initiating. You are informing, not initiating. Then there are certain names or certain attributes that are specific to Allah. They are specific to Allah, and those names you cannot call the creation with. And sometimes you have names of Allah, they are names of Allah, but the creation shares in that quality. The creation shares in that quality. So for example, a name of Allah that is exclusive to Allah is to say Rahman. Ar-Rahman or Rahman, that is exclusive to Allah. You were to say Ar-Razzaq, that is exclusive to Allah. So you have certain these kind of attributes that are exclusive to Allah. And then you have certain names of Allah, but the slaves share in that description. So Rahim, a person can be described as Rahim. A person can be described as, you have Allah's name Al-Kareem, a person to be described as Kareem. So those kind of names where Allah and the creation share in the description, it's permissible to name that person, it's permissible to name a person with that name, without including the term Abd. So you do not need to say Abdul Kareem. You can say Kareem. You can say Kareem. And there are certain names that are specific to Allah. There are certain names that are specific to Allah. Those names, you do not name the creation. So you cannot call somebody Razzaq, because Razzaq is only Allah. It's only Allah in any way, not even metaphorically. You do not use this form of the word Razzaq, this form with emphasis, that's only for Allah. So you cannot call somebody Razzaq. That would not be permissible. That would not be permissible. It's exclusive for Allah. So for example, Aziz. Allah is Al-Aziz. But this Aziz is a term Allah Himself described the Aziz of Fir'aun. وَقَالَتِ امْرَأَةُ الْعَزِيزِ, the wife of the Aziz. So you can refer to creation and Allah with that term. Therefore, it's permissible then to name somebody Aziz without needing to say Abdul Aziz, Abdul Aziz. So therefore, it's very important to remember that. It's very important to remember that. So certain qualities are only for Allah and some are for Allah and the creation. When they are shared, you can use it on the creation, and that's number one. Number two, you can use it on the creation without needing to put the prefix of Abd, without needing to say Abd, the slave of, and then the description of Allah, or the name of Allah, the quality of Allah. And then in saying that, you have sometimes the names of Allah, usually they always have Al, or they always have Al. So you say Ar-Rahman. That's when you're describing Allah, you say Ar-Rahman. Or you say Ar-Razzaq. So therefore, or you say Al-Aziz. So now if you want to name somebody Kareem or Aziz, can you name them Al-Aziz or Al-Kareem? Can you name them Al-Aziz or Al-Kareem? Because Allah would be Al-Kareem, Allah would be Al-Aziz. Can you name them Al-Aziz or Al-Kareem? Or do you have to say Aziz without the Al? So that's an interesting one where some ulama say the Al indicates, because we mentioned in Balaaghah what's the meanings of Al. And Al itself has meanings. It has a few. So one of those meanings, where it can be ma'hood, dhihni, or something like that, that gives off the meaning. We mentioned it in Balaaghah. If somebody wants to go and hear Surah Al-Fatiha, then some of them say because Al would indicate it's specific for Allah, therefore do not name the creation when you're using these qualities of Allah or names of Allah that go for the creation, do not put al. Do not put al in front of it. So do not say al-Aziz to a person. But like the way the Hanafi fuqaha phrase it in the books, they say that you can name al-Kabir and al-Kabir. You can say al-Kabir for Allah and al-Kabir for the creation. They have the al there. And they say that it would fit the meaning of this word for the creation, would have a meaning that befits the creation. And to Allah it has a meaning that befits Allah. So it would be permissible. And then connected to that is because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed the kunya, changed the pet name of Abu al-Hakam. Abu al-Hakam. So Hani narrates this. He says that when he was with a group of people who came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they were calling him Abu al-Hakam, the father of al-Hakam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, why are they calling you al-Hakam? So Hani says that when my people differ in something, when they have a dispute, they come to me and I judge between them. And then when I judge between them, then everyone is happy at my decision. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, before Ahani said the sentence, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him that Allah is al-Hakam. Allah is the one who is al-Hakam, the one who judges. So Hani told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the situation of his people. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what an amazing thing that is, that you've been gifted with this quality. The people come to you, and then when you decide something, they are pleased at your judgment. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then asked him, do you have any children? So he said, yes, I have a few. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, what's the name of your eldest son? So Abu al-Hakam said, his name is Shuraih. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, you are Abu Shuraih. You are not Abu al-Hakam, you are Abu Shuraih. You are Abu Shuraih, not Abu al-Hakam. So therefore, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam changed his name, changed his kunya of al-Hakam because of Allah being al-Hakam. And that is, number one, al-Hakam is there as well. But then there are other of the Sahaba, Hakim ibn Hizam. Hakim is a name, al-Hakam, other Sahaba, name al-Hakam, Hakim. These names were not changed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore, they mention a couple of things. Number one, there's questions of the authenticity of the hadith I just narrated about Abu al-Hakam. Number two, they say that if it's authentic, then it would indicate that to keep such a name or nickname or pet name, kunya, would not be haram but makrooh. Would not be haram but makrooh. Thirdly, they would say that what actually happened, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam changed his pet name because you have the al and the name that means what Allah has, and also this person was executing and practicing the meaning of this name. So he was not just called al-Hakam, but he was this person who judged. So they say that's where the issue comes, because Allah has this name of his, but he also applies that action. So Allah is the one who judges, Allah is the al-Hakam, but Allah also judges. Not only is he known as that, he also does the thing. So they say when you intend the meaning, and then you name someone with the name and you intend the meaning, that's where it's impermissible. That's where it's makrooh. So if the person is not doing that action, that's the meaning of this name or nickname, then it will be permissible. So that's another aspect how they would look at these names that have a connection between Allah and the creation, and when to have the al and not the al. So it would be in essence permissible to have the al or not have the al, and to name a person with that name, but it's preferable if the person does not have that quality in him. If he does, then there's more scope to not have that name, more scope to change the name or the nickname. So if you named your child with a name like Samala al-Hakam, he's not going to be a Hakim, he's not going to be judging between people for many years in his life. So therefore, it will not, the makrooh aspect would not be there. It would not be there. That's on that meaning of those ulama saying so. So in essence, those qualities that Allah and the creation have, then you can name with those names. You can name with those names with the al or without the al. With the al, without the al. Without the al, the matter is very broad scope. With the al, there could be this aspect of connecting to Allah and the name of Allah, and also connecting to, does the person do the action? So from that side, it should be avoided. Therefore, we'd say it's permissible to name somebody Aziz. It would be permissible to name somebody Aziz. So now somebody with the name of Allah, somebody who has a name of Allah or a quality of Allah in his name. So Abdullaah, Abdur Rahmaan, Abdul Majid, etc. They say that out of respect to the name of Allah, if this person is in the bathroom, then he should not say his name. A person with this name, basically this name where Allah, or this word or name where Allah's name is in it, then in the bathroom it should not be said out of respect to the name of Allah. And when we say bathroom, we mean specifically where there's a toilet. So it could just be a basin, a shower, etc. There's no najasa per se. There's no najasa per se. So to say the name of Allah in those places, there's more broad scope for permissibility. But where the toilet is, then here there's a difference of opinion on the aspect of the najasa. We'll discuss it inshallah when we discuss it in details in the beginning chapters of fiqh. But just to mention here, out of respect to the name of Allah, specifically where the toilet is, then this person whose name is Abdullah, he should not, like somebody enters the house and Abdullah is in the bathroom, and somebody enters the house, they ask who's home. So Abdullah, who's answering the call of nature or is in the toilet, let's say specifically, should not say Abdullah, out of respect for the name of Allah. So that's one thing they mention with regards to the names. Another thing is that it's going to be connected just now to nicknames, but sometimes people shorten the names of prophets or the names of Allah. They shorten the names of prophets or the names of Allah. So when it comes to the names of Allah, a person cannot half, let's call it half, instead of shorten or half the names of Allah. So if somebody's name is Abdur Razzaq, you can't cancel the Abd and call him Razzaq. You can't cancel the Abd and call him Razzaq. Because why? Why? Because Razzaq is a quality that's only for Allah. It's a quality only for Allah. So when the second part of the name of Allah is a quality that can only be for Allah, then you cannot half the name and then call the person Allah Ar-Razzaq or call him Ar-Rahmaan, etc. You have to use, or you should use the full name. So when it comes to shortening the names, specifically with the names of Allah, then the ulama say that if a person were to shorten, wanting to shorten, not change a nickname, change the name and give the person a different nickname, but rather shorten the name. Let's say his name is Abdur Rahmaan or Abdul Aziz. So when a person wants to shorten this name, they say that then you have Abd and then you have Al-Aziz, or Abd and Ar-Rahman. They say if you were to shorten it, you shorten it, or you change it on the word Abd. You shorten it on the word Abd. So therefore, you're not going to touch on the name of Allah. You're not going to touch on the name of Allah. So you call this person. It's common in the Arab words. They would say Abbudi. They say Abbud or Ubayd. So there you've shortened the name. You're not calling him the full name, but you didn't touch the name of Allah and twist or change the meaning, the name of Allah. So they say that is permissible. That is permissible. So now when it comes to, so that is out of permissible. There's only a question where some ulama say it's makrooh. If you were to put that abud, let's say as an example, you will put the ya there, because a ya indicates possession. So you say kitab, book, and you say kitabi, it's my book. You have to say sayyara, car, you say sayyarati, my car. So if you were to say abudi, it's as if the word slave, the meaning is still there, but then you've attributed it to yourself. So because you're saying my abud, and abud has it has a meaning of slave. It has a meaning of slave. So there some ulama say makruh, but there's more scope there for permissibility. There's more scope there for permissibility. So now when it comes to the name Rahman or Al-Aziz, one of those names of Allah, then here many of the ulama from many of the schools, they say here this name you should not shorten it, because it's common like in the Arab world where they would change this, they would say Uzayyiz, or they will say Duhaim for Rahman or Rahim. Rahman they change it to Duhaim. So here some of the ulama say not permissible. Some of the ulama say not permissible, because now you are changing the name of Allah. And others say it's permissible. Others say it is permissible. They say because it's found in many of the muhaddithin. Those who narrate the hadith, they would have, for example, there's a narrator in Bukhari, Abdur Rahmaan bin Ibraheem al-Dimashqi. So he used to be known as Duhaim. He used to be known as Duhaim. And he used to be known like that. So these ulama say that you are not attributing, you are not shortening or smallening, because they say tasghir. So it's a type of making the name, they have reasons why they give the name a meaning of something small. So now you have Umar, and you say a little Umar, you call him Umair. So you have a little Anas, you call him Unais. It's a type of they do it as a term of endearment. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say for Unais radiallahu anhu, for Anas radiallahu anhu, out of a term of endearment, he used to call him Unais. He used to call him Unais. So that's they call it tasghir. It's basically to smollen, to kind of make the name small. It's a means of endearment, and also to shorten the name. There's a few reasons the Arabs do it in their language. So these ulama say that it's permissible to do so because you're not intending the name of Allah. You're intending this person you're calling. You're intending this person you're calling. So you're not basically changing Rahman. You're basically just saying Duhaim. You're just calling this person Duhaim. And also, like for the name Aziz, to say Uzayyiz, they say permissible. Why? They say because you're allowed to name the person Aziz in the first place. So if his name was Aziz, and you were to smallenize the name, you just call him Uzayyiz, you call him Uzayyiz, then in that case it would be permissible. If his name was Kareem and you said Kurayim, permissible. You were to say Kurayim, permissible. Or Kurayim, permissible. So therefore, it's permissible to do it like that, even if his name is Abdul Kareem. His name was Abdul Kareem. So if it's common that people changing these small names, or these names where the person is Abd of Al-Kareem or Abd Al-Aziz, and they change it to Uzayyiz, for example, then it would be permissible. If people do it, then there's no need to fight with the people, because it's the opinion of many ulama. It's the opinion of a number of ulama, let's say. Other ulama say do not do it. In fact, like some Hanafi ulama, they mention actually, not some, the madhab itself, they say that the best names of Allah is Abdullaah and Abdur Rahmaan. But they say in these times people don't know, especially the non-Arabs, they don't know the meaning of these names. So they basically smallenize the name. So they don't say Abdur Rahmaan, they say Ruhayyim, or they say Kurayim, Abdul Kareem, they say Kurayim. And they say it's not permissible to smallenize a name of Allah. So they have the former opinion. And to that extent, they said the name of Allah is getting twisted. The name of Allah is getting twisted. So because of that, they say it's better not even to name with Abdullah and Abdur Rahman, which are the most beloved names to Allah. They say because people do not realize the meaning, and therefore they smallenize the name of Allah. So that's very important to remember. So that's now when dealing with names of Allah. So now people, for example, in certain parts of the world, a person's name is Abdullah, Abdur Rahman. They call that person, let's say they call the person Abdul. They call the person Abdul. So they basically changed this meaning of the name is now no more there. It's no more there. But is it wrong? Is it wrong? We've built the mas'ala just now. And we said to tweak with the first word of the Abd permissible. So that's essentially what's done here. Even though people think that the name is Abdul and then Rahman, but it's actually Abd al-Rahman. So that's from not understanding the Arabic. But in essence, it doesn't affect the meaning, and it's not a person tweaking the name of Allah. Rather, he's going and saying Abdul. So the Rahman he's not touching, or the Allah from Abdullah he's not touching. So that is permissible. It would be permissible. Would it be the best thing or recommend the thing to do? No, it would not be. As we're going to mention now, because some of the ulama, Mufti Taqi Uthmani, Hafidhahullah, he's written on names, and he pointed out that names have, psychologists have pointed out the positive effects a good name has on people. That's why Mufti Taqi himself, he says that it's very recommended, the ulama recommended, he says our elders recommend that a person try and always keep a good name, and also an Islamic name, because of the identity purposes, And he says that sometimes people do not keep this aspect of a good meaning of a name when naming the child. Sometimes people go for something unique or something unknown or uncommon without keeping the aspect of the meaning in mind. And then he says sometimes when you nickname, you basically butcher names of Allah, or you half names of Allah to nickname or to shorten it. So you don't say Abdur Razzaq, you say Razzaq, is what we said now. So he says that's not permissible. That's not permissible because now this Razzaq is a quality of Allah alone. So you can't call somebody else with this term. And then he said other names of prophets and Sahaba. He says people butcher these names. So he doesn't say it's haram or something, but he says it's not preferable to do this, or it's not his words exactly. But the meaning of his words is that out of respect, these kind of names should not be butchered. They should not be, they should not be tweaked or changed because they're names of prophets or names of the Sahaba, out of respect for these blessed names. So he says it's common in certain countries, certain parts of the world, that these names of prophets, they are basically not his words, but they butchered. And specifically, he mentioned South Africa. He specified South Africa. He said it's very common in South Africa. He specified South Africa. He said there in South Africa, they have names of prophets. People are named Sulaimaan and they've changed it. They call the person Sali. So Sulaimaan, the name of the Prophet of Allah, is now rendered meaningless. Is now rendered meaningless. So he says they have a name Ismail, they call the person Isi. Name of the blessed name of the Prophet of Allah, Ismail alayhi salam, rendered meaningless. Ibraheem, Ibi, rendered meaningless. Muhammad, they call him, let's say, Mo. Again, the blessed name of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Muhammad, the blessed name of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is changed. So now when we're going to discuss nicknames just now, we're going to see it's not impermissible. It's not going to be impermissible. But Mufti Taqi is pointing out the aspect. So Mufti Taqi is pointing out the aspect of respect. So he's not speaking of impermissible or something. He's saying these names are blessed names. They should be respected. So that's important to remember when a person is nicknamed, to butcher these names of these blessed names, to remember these things. Then what would the ruling be on naming somebody Abu Bakr? So it's the common name, of the common title of the Sahabi, the first of the Khulafa, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. The reason why we mention this is because his actual name is Abdullah. His actual name is Abdullah, but his pet name, his kunya, is Abu Bakr. So would it be permissible to name your child with this pet name? The ulama say it's permissible. They say Bakr, Abu Bakr means the father of Bakr. Bakr means a baby camel. And a baby camel, many of the Sahaba were named Bakr. So this baby camel was a prized treasure or prized wealth amongst the Arabs. Hence they would name like this. So it would be permissible to name your child Abu Bakr. The name of the Sahabi is Abdullah. But it would be permissible to give a child a name like this after this Sahabi. It would be permissible. And it would mean, yes, it's the name, it's the common name, if we were to call it a name of the Sahabi, and the literal meaning of it would be the father of Bakr. The father of Bakr, which means a young camel. So the meaning itself literally might not have the best meaning, hence more a person would name a child like that because of the connotation it has of the Sahabi. So it would be permissible. Then they say who has a right to choose the name from the parents? Essentially, who should choose the name of the child? It should be the parents. It should be the parents together. They should choose a name that both of them like. If they both can't decide, then they should choose a third name that they both like. But in the case where they are fighting on two names, then the last say goes to the father. But it should be done by both together. It should be a common choice. And the reason for that is that it's from part of kindness to your wife. Part of kindness to your wife is that you consult her and you don't just choose for yourself, but you consult your wife and you both choose a name together. Then the next mas'ala is a revert. Does a revert need to change his or her name? The answer to that is that if a revert's name has a good meaning, or a revert's name doesn't have a meaning, or isn't a name that we mentioned is impermissible, that we mentioned just now falling under any of the categories of impermissibility, then the revert doesn't need to change the name. It doesn't need to be an Arabic name. But generally, a person being identified as a Muslim or a connection to a person being a Muslim is the name. So a person having a Muslim name is a good thing, as Mufti Taqi mentioned. But is it a must? No. What is important, the important thing is the meaning of the name, irrespective of the language. It be a good meaning. That's the main thing. Then another mas'ala they mention, and that is a child that is born dead, or a miscarried fetus. If a lady had a miscarriage, then this fetus, do you name this fetus? The ulama say, so this is other than the Maliki school. The Maliki school say a child is only named if it actually shows signs of life when it is born. If it's Imam Malik says this. So the other schools essentially say that you name a child. You name your child if basically, as Imam Tahawi from the Hanafi Madhab says, number one, 4 months have gone. 4 months have gone by, and number two, not specifically, they must find these two stipulations, but 4 months you can name. If not, then if body parts are starting to develop, it's starting to develop into a human, then you can name the child. Then you mustahab to name the child. Then it's mustahab to name this child. And it's connected to, as you mentioned last time, that is after 4 months, then the soul is blown into the child, and therefore it will be resurrected. Therefore you name the child. Therefore, you name the child. And if you don't know the gender of this child, then they say you name the child with a gender neutral name. You name the child with a gender neutral name if you don't know the gender of the child. Another thing is when addressing and calling someone whose name you don't know. So it's common in some parts of the world that if you don't know a person's name and you want to shout for the person or call the person, they call him Muhammad. So some of the ulama were asked what's the rule on this. So they say out of respect to the name of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it shouldn't be done. Rather, you should call that person Abdullah. You should call the person Abdullah, because for sure it might not be his exact name, but the meaning is correct. He's the slave of Allah. So you call that person Abdullah when you don't know his name. When you don't know the person's name, you call them Abdullah. Or it's good or recommended to call the person Abdullah. Then we mentioned the mas'ala of basically smallening, if we were to have a word like that, basically to smallenize the name. We call it tasghir. Right? We said Amr, Umair, Anas, Unais, and we spoke on the permissibility. Another thing is tarkhim, and that is basically to delete some letters of the name. So to shorten the name. We say that will be permissible. That will be permissible as long as there's no bad meaning or insult intended. So for example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ya Aish, Jibreel yuqri'uki as-salam. Yuqri'uki as-salam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam addressed Aisha radiallahu anha saying, Oh Aish. He didn't say Aisha. That's a form of tarkhim. Again, endearment is one of the reasons the Arabs do it. So you delete some of the letters of the name out of positive meaning, out of endearment to the person, permissible to do so. Okay, so one of the last few masail, we're going to discuss the ruling on nicknames. So the ulama say nicknames are permissible if they do not have any insult for the person, if they do not have any disparagement of the person, if they do not include any deficiency for a person, and number 4, if the person does not dislike the name. So those 4 things. It must not be an insult to the person must not dislike the name, it must not be referring to a deficiency in a person, and it must not be a disparagement to the person. Those 4 things are found, then the nickname is permissible. The nickname is permissible. Generally, the fuqaha say about a nickname that it's something of honor to the person. It should have a positive meaning. It should have a positive meaning. So when they say, for example, they say it's permissible, they look at like the nicknames of Sahaba had. So you have Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the truthful one, for example. You could have Umar al-Faruq. So you have these kind of names. They were known like that. So they say if you're going to give a person a name that has a meaning, or a nickname that has a meaning like that, as-Siddiq, the honest one, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam known as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, and then you can give the person such a name if the person's action is in line with the meaning of this nickname you're giving the person. Otherwise not. So therefore, if you're going to nickname a person with something that is an insult or something he doesn't like or deficiency in this person, for example, it will all not be permissible. So you can't nickname a person, even if he's pleased, you're not allowed to with these names. You're not allowed to nickname a person, for example, with an animal. You're not allowed to do that, because that would kind of be degrading to the person. It would kind of be degrading to the person, so you cannot. And Allah says, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Do not insult one another with nicknames. Do not insult another with nicknames. So now you have some of the tabi'een, some of the muhaddithin, they had names. If you look at some of the ulama in the past, they had names that had a negative meaning. You had Al-A'mash, for example. It's somebody who has like issue in the eye. So they had names like Al-A'war, Al-A'mash, for example. They have meanings. It has a negative meaning. So it has like somebody who is actually squint, for example, or deficiency in an eye or something, a problem with his leg, etc. They had names like that. The ulama say it's not permissible for a person to nickname or to refer to another person with such a name that has, or such a nickname that indicates the deficiency of the person, unless that is how the person is known. Unless that is how the person is commonly known, then you can name the person like that. Because then you're not basically insulting the person or indicating to the deficiency in the person. It's just that the person is known like that. The person is known as Al-A'mash. He's just known like that. The person with some deficiency in his eye, he's known like that, so you're naming him like that. So that's when it is permissible. And therefore, nicknames that basically they do not have a specific meaning, but just a change of a name. So a person's name, for example, is Adam, and he's now called Harry, for example. Or he did something, he's called whatever his name may be. If it's not an insult, and those 4 things we mentioned, then it would be permissible. It would be permissible. And if it has a specific meaning, then it must fit in line with the action the person does. It must fit in line with the action the person does, like Al-Amin, As-Siddiq, the person should be as the nickname indicates. So otherwise it is permissible. So the ulama say that a person should not refer to his parent by name. Out of respect, he shouldn't refer to his parent by name. And they also say a person should not refer to the teacher by name. Out of respect to the scholar or the teacher, and also out of respect to the parent, they should not refer to them to refer to them by name. Then, second last mas'ala, what is the ruling on referring to somebody as sayyid? Now when we say sayyid, we mean the Arabic meaning of it, because in some cultures they say sayyid and they refer to the person being from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we say sayyid, it means like a leader. It means like a leader. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited a person call a non-Muslim or a sinning Muslim as a sayyid, because that is a name that elevates a person. So these people, you do not elevate them. You do not elevate them, so you do not call a non-Muslim or a sinful person, or they say a munafiq. Or a munafiq, you do not call that person sayyid. That's what the hadith says. And then, but other people, permissible to call them sayyid. Because it's common, they say sayyidi, something like that. Yeah, sayyidi, they refer to a person like that, they say it's permissible. And then, but in saying that, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he was said, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Sayyidana wabna Sayyidina, oh our Sayyid, you are and the son of our Sayyid. Or he said, or they said to him, Ya Rasulullah, Anta Sayyiduna wabnu Sayyidina. Ya Rasulullah, you are our Sayyid and you are the son of our Sayyid. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to say, إنما أنا عبد الله ورسوله ما أحب أن ترفعوني فوق منزلة التي أنزلني الله عليها. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to say that in the one narration said, Sayyid wallah, Allah is your Sayyid. Allah is the Sayyid. In another narration, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that I am just the messenger of Allah and the slave of Allah. I do not like the people raise me above the rank that Allah put me on. So what about that? Those are hadith. Because you have the hadith which hadith indicates permissibility? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam referring to his grandson, he said, هذا ibni هذا sayyid. He said, my son, the son of mine is going to be a sayyid, going to be a leader of the people. So that indicates permissibility. And these hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is basically shrugging off the name, the ulama say that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam loved modesty. He didn't like people to praise him or praise him in his face. So that's why they say sometimes if a person is called with a name like that, he should shrug it off. He should shrug it off. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with the highest strength from Allah, he still shrugged it off and loved humility. Imam Abu Dawood also titles a chapter of praising similarly and brings this hadith as well, or one of these two narrations that give to this meaning. Then lastly, what would the rule be on calling somebody moulana? What would the rule be on calling somebody moulana? Why? Because it's common that people are called moulana. In the Arab world, for example, certain Arab countries, they would call a person out of respect, any person, not specifically a scholar, they would say moulana. And in the subcontinent, or the parts of the world that follow the subcontinent, they would call a scholar moulana. So to conclude this, we built the qaida of the mas'ala. And that is, you have certain names or qualities that are for Allah and for the creation. So here, for Allah, is Allah known as Maulana? The answer is yes. In Surah Al-Baqarah we read, رَبَّنَا وَلَا تُحَمِّلْنَا مَا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا بِهِ وَاعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا أَنْتَ, referring you, O Allah, أنت مولانا, you are Maulana. And then you read, قُلْ لَن يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا هُوَ, he is Maulana. Huwa is in referring to Allah, he is Maulana. He is Maulana. So Allah is referred to as Maulana in the Quran. Allah refers to himself as Maulana in the Quran. So now, we first have to understand that the word Maulana, it's not a word in itself. This whole word Maulana, it's not a word in itself. Rather, it comprises of two words, Mawla and Na. Mawla and Na. So the Na is the particle that indicates the meaning of our. So you say Rabbana, our Lord. This na that you say in Rabbana is the same na that's found in Maulana. So basically the word is Mawla. And then na to indicate that this person, or in Allah say this Lord, this Mawla is our Mawla. Or this person, or the scholar that you're going to say, he's our Mawla. He's our Mawla. So Maulana is not a word itself. People think that the whole word is one word. So they think, some would think it means like a scholar. So they think Maulana means scholar. So you say, what is this person? You say he is a Maulana. But in reality, if you translate it exactly, it doesn't make sense to say a Maulana, because it's our Mawla. He is our Mawla. That's how it actually translates. It doesn't work. So it doesn't make sense. So Maulana means basically, it has different meanings. It has different meanings. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself told the disbelievers in one of the battles, he said, Allahu Maulana. Allah is our Mawla. Allah is our, because they said Lat is our Mawla. Lat is our Lord. Or Lat is their Mawla. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allah is our Maulana. So Mawla, from the word waw, lam, ya, it has different meanings. Amongst the meanings would be a leader. Amongst the meanings would be a protector. Amongst the meanings could be a friend. In the Quran you read mawlahum, you read mawlana, you read mawlakum, huwa mawlakum, فَنِعْمَ الْمَوْلَى. He is your Mawla. Allah, that is, He is mawlakum, فَنِعْمَ الْمَوْلَى. What an amazing Mawla He is. So that's one of the meanings of Mawla. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells Zayd radiallahu anhu, he says, Anta akhuna wa mawlana. You are our brother and our Mawla. So the Mawla means a freed slave. Mawla means a freed slave in that context. So Mawla has many meanings. So when it comes to Allah, it means Allah is the complete master of people. It means Allah is the master, but also a complete master. No comparison. And for a human, when the term Mawla is used, it depends on the context. It depends on the context, and then the meaning fits the human. So if it is a slave, a freed slave, you call him Maulana, it means our freed slave. Or if you just call him Mawla, it means a freed slave. And then for a scholar, it would mean, when you say a scholar is Maulana, you'd basically be saying the scholar is basically our leader. He's our leader, we follow him, we look up to him. That's what it would mean. Therefore, it would be permissible. It would be permissible to call somebody as a title out of respect, to call them Maulana. It would be permissible to call them Maulana. And with that, we've covered most of the masail. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll take the masail of a surname. There's just a few things connected to that, and 5 or 6 small things connected to the kunya. And with that, we have completed what we wanted to complete with the fiqh of the newborn. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us knowledge that benefits us and benefits us with the knowledge that He teaches us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.